Barbara Pratt, Museum Educator for Public Programs. And tonight we are in for a treat as our guests take us into the clouds through art and science to see how one can affect the other. Karen LaMonte is a world-renowned artist, a Fulbright scholar, and a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design, whose work has been featured at many international art fairs, including the Venice Biennale, and in the collections of major museums around the world. Her fascination with the volume and weight of clouds and their ethereal nature led to her most recent series of sculptural cloud forms. That work and iconic pieces from our archives are the subject of the extraordinary current retrospective of her work here at Munson, Celestial Bodies, sculpture by Karen LaMonte. Bill Kardas is the Storm Tracker 2 chief meteorologist for WKTV Broadcasting current weather and forecasts for all of the Mohawk Valley in central New York State. He visits dozens of schools each year and teaches climatology at Herkimer College. A graduate of SUNY Albany in atmospheric science, Bill completed his master's in geoscience from Mississippi State University. Bill also holds a broadcaster seal from the National Weather Association. In addition to his scientific work keeping us all safe from storms and pestilence, Bill is a keen artistic photographer. And our moderator this evening is Stephen Harrison, who knows absolutely nothing about clouds. But as museum director and chief curator, he organized this beautiful show of Karen's work. And as a private pilot, he does his level best to stay well away from the clouds. Please help me in welcoming Karen LaMonte, Bill Kardas, and Stephen Harrison to the Munson stage.
Well, thank you all so much for coming out today. It's especially wonderful to welcome Bill Kardas and Karen LaMonte to the Munson stage. So thank you both for being with us today. Well, I'm just going to start it right off and ask you, Bill, were you interested in science from a young age?
Absolutely. I had a variety of interests in science. A lot of it had to do with the sky, but it wasn't necessarily weather. I loved astronomy, and I loved earth science, but weather ended up becoming my passion when I was in middle school. I grew up in Troy, and there was a very powerful line of storms, which happened out here too on May 31st, 1998. But where I grew up, that ended up becoming a big tornado outbreak. There was Mechanicville, there was an F3 tornado, and I was greatly impacted by that event growing up. It was the first time that I've seen weather quite like that, and that was kind of the event that got me interested in this field of science.
That's fantastic and fascinating. And did your interest in photography follow on from your interest in big clouds and weather events?
Photography is actually a very recent hobby of mine, and it started with the Northern Lights. I was very fortunate to visit Iceland 2 years ago and see the Northern Lights, which is an incredible experience. But to really capture the Northern Lights, photography it just gives you a different perspective. And I think that the Northern Lights, using a camera, you can see just amazing things. It allows you to capture more light and gives you a better experience. And there's an art to that too. I've just learned how complex it is. It's not just pointing a camera and taking a picture, and changing the settings in the camera will give you completely different results. And I've just found that really fascinating.
Oh, of course. Well, we'll get back to that in a moment, but Karen, how about you? Did you grow up with an interest in or any background in science at all?
Well, I grew up with a very large imagination and basically no background in science. When I was a kid, I was living in New York City, and I thought that clouds came from the Con Edison electric plant because I saw this giant tube and it was puffing out all this white stuff into the sky, and then there were white things flying in the sky. And I was like, oh, that's where they come from, So
Thanks to Con Ed.
yeah. So really, my parents were in the medical world, but I really have absolutely no background in science.
Well, we know that has changed through the years because you've collaborated with a number of scientists throughout your career. And I just wonder if, do you have previous works of art other than your work in sculpture now that involve science?
I made contact with science when I was working on the kimono sculptures. And for the very first time, I actually needed data because I wanted the figures that were wearing the kimonos not to be specific women, but to be a very average woman. So, believe it or not, NASA had collected data for the space station on the largest human beings that were going to be there, as well as the smallest human beings that were going to be there. And that was a 40-year-old Japanese female. So I used that data from NASA to create the mannequins upon which I arranged the kimonos.
Did that also take you into later, into the work in your current series on clouds?
The thing that brought me to clouds was actually an experience. It was actually the Earth that brought me to the clouds. It was an experience I had in Toyama, in a parking lot, believe it or not. I was there speaking to some students, and I took a break, and I went for a walk, and I came upon a massive parking lot where the fishermen were laying out and repairing their fishing nets. And they were twisted into these bunches, and they were this black mesh on a light background. And I just saw this like deep sculptural forms, and I saw somehow the earth underneath these nets. And that was the first thing that made me start thinking about landscape and subsequently skyscapes.
And then how have you used science in arriving at your cloud forms?
Well, my first idea, so reality or realism is very important to me in sculpture because it makes such a strong connection to the viewer, from me as a sculptor to the viewer. And so I wanted my clouds to be realistic. So I had a bunch of terrible ideas. The first one was I was going to fly 1,000 drones into the sky and surround a cloud and do photographs and use what's called photogrammetry to build a three-dimensional shape. This is a completely implausible idea. There are so many problems with it. First, clouds are changing so swiftly that it would not be possible to gather those photographs in any reasonable time period, as well as the fact that clouds are not shapes. They're just varying densities. So to find the edge of a cloud was actually one of the most intriguing problems in making the cloud sculptures. And so on the recommendation of a friend at the Cloud Appreciation Society, of which I am a member.
There is a Cloud Appreciation Society.
There is a Cloud Appreciation Society, of which I am not only a member, but I am an ambassador. So,
And I'm embarrassed to say that I'm not a member.
But you will be after tonight. Before the 10 o'clock news, I know.
But they recommended, the head of that organization recommended that I get in touch with scientists who are studying weather, climatologists. And there was a particular group in California that had written a software program where they were simulating weather. And via these simulations, they were studying density, basically, how reflective clouds are. And I said, well, could we extract from these simulations a shape? And they didn't say anything for a while, and they got back to me and they said, Well, we've done the longest simulation we've ever done with this program. We took 5 days on a supercomputer, and we have this very robust, more detailed block of weather, and we think from there we can extract a cloud form. And of course, the first thing I thought is, oh no, am I going to get a bill for this? I think time on a supercomputer is very expensive. But so from that block of weather, we were able to extract a single cumulus cloud, which is the one that I've been working with in the exhibition here.
There it is.
And it was so interesting because we had still those same issues of no edge. Here it is, it's a form without an edge. And as a sculptor, I need to work with the edge of a shape. And so we set a density at which, a water density at which inside, greater than that density was in the cloud, less than that density was out. And that became the shape of our cloud. And there was an additional thing, really working with scientists changed the way I work in very significant ways. Access to data like the actual weight of the cloud became really a key point as I went about sculpting in various materials. Because what I did was I made a 1-to-1 ratio between the water weight of the cloud and the material weight of the sculpture. So when you see a 70%, like one of the marble clouds is a 70% cloud, that's 70% of the weight of the actual cloud.
So that cloud, your form, actually existed as a cloud in nature. Oh, I think there's some artistic license.
Very much so, very much so. The data set was gathered from, one of the most challenging things about modeling weather is finding complete data sets or gathering complete data sets. And so this one, the data set they were using is BOMA, which is information that was gathered from Barbados in 1968, which is almost my birth year. So I thought, like, yes, it's my cloud. And they fly these planes that have sensors all over them, and they take wind speed, water density, temperature, and it's these super complicated data sets that enable the climatologist then to look at how weather behaves.
Not unlike I would think a hurricane hunter might do in a hurricane, right?
Sure, yeah, it's flying into a hurricane to measure something directly is very important. And it's still done today. I mean, we have ways of measuring a hurricane from a distance with satellites, but if you really want to get a better results, you've got to still be in the environment and take direct measurements.
Karen, knowing what you went through to get that sort of research, I mean, do you think maybe now you just would put some blobs together and create something that just look like a cloud, or why is it important, in other words, to have the data?
For me, the data is important because there's a level of honesty there, and in taking something that is untouchable and something that I think people are so curious about, like a cloud, and bringing it down to the ground and bringing it into touch, with people. I think that it should be as realistic as possible, because the details are the fascinating thing. I mean, there's holes through clouds, and there's just so much going on that I didn't anticipate, and we don't anticipate as we sit on Earth and look up at usually the bottom of the cloud, or maybe the side of the cloud, and then when you fly through, you get a much clearer picture of what's actually up there. But I thought it was just amazing to be able to bring a cloud to people and to the indoors, to capture a cloud.
Bill, hearing what Karen says is so fascinating, at least to me. What are your thoughts about how Karen has used science in her artwork?
Oh, this is absolutely fascinating. I mean, I think it's incredible that you can find a way to capture all of this and actually put it into something into a material, because like you mentioned, it's so complicated. Clouds are incredibly complex, and it's hard to, like you said, define some of these, especially with the different types of clouds. How do you define the edge of a stratus cloud? It's very, very hard to do that. But that you found a way to put this together is pretty incredible. Yeah.
Well, and we were talking about how light affects clouds and how you know, the color of them. And so, Karen, how have you used materials to get at the visual aspects of clouds?
Yeah. I think glass is the material that I was able to use in the most honest way. I worked with scientists, actually German scientists, developing a very low density opal glass. And opal glasses, believe it or not, reflect and refract light exactly the same way the tiny water particles in a cloud do. So the glass pieces in the exhibitions, it's what I call like radical material honesty. Like they are functioning with light exactly the same way a cloud functions with light.
It's neat. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, you have upstairs several different types of materials. You've worked in marble and in metal, obviously, and in glass, of course. Which do you think really reflects what you're trying to say through your sculptural work?
Ooh. Well, I think, I always think of the materials of each of them having a unique voice, and they're saying a different aspect of the sculpture. For example, the marble, it's such an ancient material, and it formed in a way, it almost seems like how it flows and has all these eddies and everything, that it moves visually in the way that the clouds do, So, and its weight, that kind of seems very cloud-like to me. But the rust, the iron, it's actually the weather that is making those pieces rust.
Wow.
So the weather is patinaing the artwork forming, and the glass is carrying the light exactly as the clouds do. So I feel like each one sort of brings to the fore a different aspect of the work.
Were any of those revelations surprising to you as you worked in these forms? Or had the data helped predict how some of these would work?
The big surprise for me was how parallel opal glass was to cloud. And I checked it several times, both with scientists from Corning, who are, experts in glass, and then with the meteorologist. I did have one amazing experience, actually.
Oh.
I cast a very unusual glass ceramic. So it's material that starts as a glass, but then as it gets exposed to heat, turns into a ceramic. It's a Corning material. And we poured it into a mold. And what ended up happening is, at what's the top of the cloud, the material crystallized and turned into a ceramic. But at the bottom of the cloud, it remained a glass. So in just the same way that at the top of a cloud, it's frozen. And those are actually crystals. And then
Wow,
at the
yeah.
bottom of the cloud, it was liquid, like drops of water. So it was one of those perfect parallel moments. And it only happened once.
Nice accident.
Yes.
How about for you, Bill? What has been the most surprising, revelation that you've found through your career with, whether substances like clouds?
I think just early on, studying this, there's a whole class in college dedicated to cloud physics.
Clouds 101.
You would think, well, this is an upper level class.
Oh, 401.
So, with a lot of calculus involved.
I'm going to stop there, so
Yeah.
you go ahead.
Learning about the complexity of water and the crystal shapes that it makes. That was a surprise to me. I will be honest, how much of that did I actually retain? It's fascinating, though, how complex clouds are and how unique they are. From going beyond college and into my career, when I look up at the sky, I probably see things very differently than Karen does. I always look at things and I'm like, okay, so what's going to happen? Do I need to be worried about this one? They are beautiful. I would say that some of the more striking clouds to me are the ones, and you mentioned this, of light, how light interacts with clouds. And so one thing they didn't teach in college was how to predict a nice sunset. People really love to know if there's going to be a nice sunset, and I understand. There is a way to do it, and I learned that it's high clouds. Cirrus clouds in particular are the most likely to produce very colorful skies as we head into the evening time. So those high clouds are very, that's what you look for.
I see. Well, Karen, what do you think are the potential advantages moving forward of art and science working together in general, not so much, not necessarily in your own work, but in you know, in the world at large?
Yeah. Well, I think people are getting smarter, and I think the scientific component is a point of fascination for many people who come to a museum. And in addition to that, at least the scientists I worked with felt that my work reflecting, having a scientific element to it, that it was furthering their objectives in getting science to the people. So they saw the collaboration as benefiting their mission.
Very interesting. And do you, Bill? I mean, what do you see as the benefits of science and art intersecting?
I think it's just that it helps people understand the world. I mean, the art, the mind just looks at things differently. You know, from the scientific standpoint, you can look at a cloud and think of, you know, like I said, from where my mind goes, what's going to happen next. But then just to appreciate it is a completely different way of thinking about things. And you can merge both of those together. You can appreciate something thoroughly understanding it.
Well, it was very interesting when you and I walked through the exhibition earlier. You know, seeing Karen's work through a different set of eyes is really very, very interesting because, you know, in some ways you drew and draw wonderful parallels. It's very easy to see the parallels with science, particularly with your fascination with data and how you've used math and science to, you know, reflected within your art. But also it's this whole idea of light and shadow, and we see this, you know, so much in the world in many different ways. So I'm very curious, both of you communicate to the world through your work, your websites, through your broadcasts, through your artwork. When you present yourselves through sculpture or broadcast, what are you hoping to say to your audiences? Bill, how about you first?
That's a very good question. I would say being able to appreciate what we study and to learn from it and understand the complexity of it and the science behind it is what fascinates me about weather. I would love to pass that along to people.
Well, you get you have 52,000 followers on your Facebook page, and I dare say many of them ask you for tips on photography. And what is the link that you draw between when you respond to them between photographing weather and the weather itself?
So I would say get out there and practice.
Right.
Get out there and practice. I mean, if you want to capture something, you got to start somewhere. I didn't learn how to capture the northern lights with my digital camera overnight. It was for me, it was very hard because coming from a scientific background, it was kind of a struggle. But practicing and learning and failing, and I can imagine Karen probably has lots of stories about artwork that didn't come out as planned. That's just part of the process,
It is,
right? It's
definitely.
just sometimes you have an idea and you think it's going to happen one way, but the only way that you're going to learn from something is just get out and do it, right?
Exactly, exactly. That is so true. More true than I would like to admit. But,
Well, how about for you, Karen?
well, for me, I think very similarly, my fascination with the world, when I learned that a cloud can weigh tens to hundreds of tons, I thought, this is insane. This makes no sense at all, And I love it when things don't make sense and then you start digging and all of a sudden you learn the reasons why. Like, how could something that weighs tens of tons float effortlessly in the sky, without, any engine or anything like that on it, and it turns out it's a combination of the thermals, the heat rising up off the earth and friction on the tiny little water droplets and, all these things, it makes the world a richer place when you look out at it.
Well, I know probably our audience is itching to ask you both a few questions, so I wonder, would you take a few?
Of course.
Great. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this question's for Karen, but I'd like Bill to pick up on it also. Karen, you've used science and technology to generate a lot of your work. What about going out on the field, say into the Great Plains states, spending time in the field, photographing and using those photographs to come back and either inspire you or to craft your work around it? Have you done any of that type of
I actually,
field work?
during COVID, I got in a camper van and I went out west to the Black grassland because I was looking for a feature that was uniquely American. And I did a lot of photography out there, but wasn't quite satisfied or I didn't quite know how to go from that starting point back to work in the studio. So then I called up my friends, the scientists again with the supercomputer, and I said, what is our closest data set to the Great Plains? And it turns out it was St. Louis. So I was like, okay, can we, because I have this idea about the Industrial Revolution and when carbon started going into the atmosphere, like I just, it's changing our weather, definitely. And so I said, could we take that data set and instead of running your program forward, could we run it backwards? And so we ran the simulation backwards to 1850. And actually just when I left the studio, I carved a small cloud from that time period and left it outside to rest while I'm here.
A cloud from 1850.
Yes.
My goodness. Amazing. Other questions? Yes.
In the exhibit, you talk about clouds that are becoming extinct. And with you and Bill there, why are they becoming extinct? Is it because of what you've touched on, the weather change, the climate change, and the carbon?
Stratocumulus.
I've heard about this.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, sure, I'll repeat it. One thing that is mentioned in the text in the exhibition is there's one type of cloud that is in danger of becoming extinct. And this is actually the cloud that the scientists in California are studying. It's called stratocumulus. And what's happening is the increased temperature as well as the increased levels of carbon CO2 in the air are making it harder for that cloud to form. And the reason why it's of concern is that stratocumulus, and particularly marine stratocumulus, is the most prevalent cloud over the oceans. And the oceans, as we all know, are quite dark, and they're absorbing an incredible amount of heat. And without the marine stratocumulus to act as a reflector, it's increasing the pace of change. And so they're looking at that reflective quality of those clouds with great concern, with the fear that it could go extinct. Extinct is such a shocking word, you know, but they used it in describing, because they were like, we know, this is how it happened. They said, we know you're interested in cumulus clouds, but could we introduce you to the stratocumulus cloud? Because this one has a very interesting story. And so that's, you know, and I actually have a small casting of a stratocumulus cloud at home.
Do clouds really affect the reaction of the Earth below them, Bill?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm thinking it practically in terms of rainfall,
Yeah.
but yes, they provide a blanket. During the day, they prevent the solar radiation from hitting the Earth, but then at night, they act like a blanket as they absorb heat, and they act as a greenhouse gas.
Wow.
Now,
All right. Yes?
Would you ever look into making more pieces from things from Earth, like water, like flowing water, or like someone said, grasslands? Would you ever be inspired by any other thing here?
The question was, Karen, would you ever be interested in making more pieces that are inspired by nature and natural effects?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, the more I learn, the more I'm fascinated, you know, and particularly in this interconnectedness of things, you know, how the heat of the Earth is evaporating water that's fallen and driving it back up. And, you know, I love the whole system of weather, how it's constantly moving and all the elements are, or like a big orchestra playing together, you know.
Wonderful. Yes, back in the back. You there. Mhm.
So I have 1,000 questions, and I'm gonna.
How about just one? The first one.
For Karen, I'm curious about. I bought the book that talks about your work, and I was reading through it and looking at some of the videos and things about the work that you've been doing displayed upstairs, and I'm curious about how you kind of translated your experience as a glass artist into these other materials, and how you've chosen the other materials that you've used, and how, you know, the differences and similarities to your base glass experience kind of helped you understand how to work with these others. And do you ever work small? I mean, everything. I squeezed in a second.
Okay.
Okay, well, did everyone hear that? It was a question about, you know, the materials that you use.
Yeah, yeah. Well, initially, in my imagination, I was a painter. And when I went to art school, that's the first department I signed up in. It was giant. There were 100 people in the class, so I was immediately intimidated. Went back to the registrar and I said, what is the smallest department in this school? And she said, the glass department. I said, how many people? She said, 5. I said, perfect. And so that's really, and I really see that first, that it was a deep dive into a single material for 3 years. And I feel like that became, you know, it created a fascination for that material, but it also became a great framework on which I could build other materials. Like I was always working in the bronze casting studio. I learned how to weld. I was doing ceramics. So there were always other materials in the game. And it's just, when I went to the Czech Republic, I went with this idea to make these large dresses, and knock on wood, that worked. That was one of some of the projects that worked. And they were so unusual that they kind of stole the spotlight from all of the other efforts for a while. But now, thanks to Stephen's curation, you know, people are seeing the kind of breadth of materials that fascinate me. So.
Another question, yes, sir.
Could you just explain again how you created the cloud that had ceramic on top and glass? I mean, you only did it once.
Yeah.
Explain how did that all happen?
How did it happen? Sure. So explain how the cloud that was ceramic on top and glass on the bottom, like how did that happen? So it's a material called glass ceramic from Corning, and we poured poured it into the mold, and the mold when we poured in was actually upside down. So the top of the cloud was at the bottom. So this material flows in and it's hot, it's liquid, and the shape of the cloud was smaller at the bottom, and there was more mold material around. So these components led to the fact that the top part of the cloud, which was on the bottom, stayed hotter longer than the bottom part of the cloud. And that allowed the crystallization process to happen. And so when I took the material away and I stood it up, you could see that it was white and ceramicized on top, and then clear and still glass on the bottom.
How about one for Bill? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it is for Bill. I traveled Route 233 for many years, and because it's a two-way bridge, around noontime, I often see clouds in the formation like the Swiss Alps. And the lady who's accompanying me is from Switzerland, so of course we count on it. So many years later, I'm driving with my friend here, and we see the same thing. I'm wondering how often clouds repeat a pattern.
How often do clouds repeat a pattern that you might see in the sky?
It sounds like whatever was causing that cloud was happening on the ground, maybe a hill or a mountain.
A Con Ed smokestack?
One of those. Something on the ground sounds like is causing that cloud to form, most likely a hill or a terrain-based cloud. Those are the types that you'll see most frequently form in the same spot. For us, the most common type of cloud comes from Lake Ontario, lake effect clouds, which we're going to be getting lots and lots of soon.
Yes, one more here.
This is a question for Bill. It seems we get more color in clouds in spring and fall, or at least the sunsets anyway. Could you talk about the different things that cause color in clouds at sunset and sunrise?
What are the different elements that cause color? Yes.
The color comes from scattering. Light scatters when light passes through more of the atmosphere, it scatters, and that's why you see color in the beginning of the day or the end of the day, because with the light being low to the horizon, more of it passes through the atmosphere compared to in the middle of the day. And that scattering effect causes all the dramatic colors. So your pinks, your oranges, your yellows, that's all due to the scattering effect. And it's very complicated. I mean, it's the type of cloud that the light is scattering from. Where you would get more colorful sunsets in the spring or the fall, I haven't heard that before. My experience is your most colorful sunsets, at least from what I've seen, have been in the summertime. I know that another element is what's in the atmosphere. When we had the wildfire smoke, we had some of the most breathtaking sunsets, the most colorful sunsets, because the wildfire smoke, the particles were creating more of a scattering effect. So that's another thing that can happen too.
I was assuming it was the angle of the rays in the spring and the fall coming through.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Karen, is it safe to assume that the cumulus cloud is your favorite cloud, since you've sculpted so many of them?
No, actually,
What would be your favorite cloud?
my favorite cloud is asperitas. And
Asparagus?
No, asperitas.
Asperitas.
And I love both the cloud, and I also love the story of the cloud. So I will read you its description. A dramatic, chaotic, wave-like structure on the underside of altocumulus or stratocumulus. And it is the most recently classified cloud, most recently recognized cloud. It happened in 2017. It's the first new cloud recognized by the World Meteorological Organization in 70 years. And the attention was drawn to this cloud by citizen scientists. So, you know, you're actually a scientist, but people who are photographing and documenting clouds, and a major contributor to the effort is actually the Cloud Appreciation Society. So we consider it a big cake.
Have you ever heard of this cloud, Bill?
I have.
But do you know it as an asparagus cloud?
So the previous name was the undulatus asperatus cloud.
Oh, okay.
So it's a more, the name has gotten shortened. Before the days of social media, this is March 2012, when we had that really warm stretch, when it hit 80 in March. This goes back.
Oh, yes.
13 years ago.
The great 2012
heat wave. So the reason why I remember this so much is because the day that we hit 80 in March, the next day, we had that type of cloud come in. It rolled across the sky, and this type of cloud produces terror when people see it, because it looks very threatening. It looks very ominous. There's waves in the cloud. It has all this texture.
Yeah.
The cloud itself, in terms of producing weather, does nothing. It doesn't produce any damaging weather at all. But people were calling the news station. What's going on? I see this terrible cloud. And at that time, there were smartphones that were starting to come into the picture, so we were able to get pictures from that. And that's where I discovered asparagus clouds.
Well, Bill, what would be your favorite cloud?
I like the cumulonimbus cloud. That's the destructive thunderstorm cloud. Again, going back to the beginning, what got me into this was
Peril and pestilence. Exactly. Well, I will confess that my favorite is the cirrus cloud, which sits all the way up on the top. And I like it because it predicts usually it predicts within 24 hours or 48 hours rain or snow. But I'll tell you what, we still need great forecasts. And we get them from you every night on WKTV, Storm Tracker 2. So thank you so much for what you do for our guests. And Karen, I couldn't be more grateful to you for sharing with us your very, very beautiful and extraordinary sculpture, especially your recent work with clouds. Thank you so much. Thank all of you, our friends here at Munson, and for making this exhibition possible and this evening possible for all of us to enjoy. Please always look at munson.art for the latest program and event that we have here. This is your museum, and we're so happy to share it with you. Thank you for coming tonight.